Governance can become complicated very quickly. One moment you're trying to understand the responsibilities of a board, the next, you're researching internal controls, oversight structures, risk governance, committee responsibilities, accountability frameworks, or the difference between governance and management. And the information you need may be scattered across articles, regulatory publications, professional websites, reports, and search results. So where do you begin? That's exactly where Governancepedia comes in. Governancepedia is a specialist knowledge website designed for people who want to discover, understand, and explore governance topics in one dedicated environment. Whether you're a governance professional, executive, board member, risk specialist, compliance professional, student, researcher, or simply someone trying to understand how good governance works, Governancepedia gives you a place to explore governance knowledge without starting every question from scratch. You can discover governance concepts, explore specialist subjects, research terminology, move between related topics, and gradually build a much broader understanding of how governance works across organizations. But today, we're putting the spotlight on one of the most important capabilities of the entire website, searching the Governancepedia Knowledge Library. Because a knowledge library is only valuable if you can actually find the information you need. So how do you search Governancepedia? How do you move from a broad question to a useful topic? How can you refine what you're looking for? And how can one search lead you toward a much deeper understanding of governance? We're going to walk through the process from the perspective of someone actually trying to solve a governance question. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how to approach the Governancepedia Knowledge Library and how to use it as the starting point for deeper governance research. Let's search Governancepedia. Before we start searching, it's important to understand what Governancepedia is trying to accomplish. At its core, Governancepedia is about making governance knowledge easier to discover and understand. Governance is an enormous subject. It can include corporate governance, board structures, accountability, oversight, risk management, compliance, policies, internal controls, committees, reporting, organizational responsibilities, and much more. And these subjects rarely exist independently. Search for board governance, for example, and you may quickly encounter questions about board independence, committees, reporting, conflicts of interest, executive oversight, and accountability. Search for third-party risk, and you may find yourself exploring due diligence, monitoring, controls, escalation, contractual oversight, and governance responsibilities. That's why Governancepedia should be approached as more than somewhere to look up a definition. Think of it as a governance knowledge environment. An active visitor might begin with one question: what does an audit committee actually do? That search could lead toward committee responsibilities. From there, they might explore internal controls, then risk oversight, then reporting responsibilities, then escalation procedures. One question creates another, and that's exactly how useful research often works. You don't always know the final question when you begin. Governancepedia helps you start exploring, and the gateway to that exploration is the Knowledge Library. Consider how governance research normally happens. Imagine you're responsible for improving third-party oversight within an organization. You search the internet, you open 10 browser tabs. One article discusses vendor risk, another discusses outsourcing. A regulatory document uses completely different terminology. A consulting paper introduces another framework. You save a PDF, bookmark another page, email yourself a link, and 20 minutes later, you have plenty of information, but not necessarily more clarity. That's one of the fundamental problems with researching complex subjects online. The problem isn't always the absence of information. Sometimes it's too much information without enough structure. Governance makes this particularly difficult because terminology frequently overlaps. Governance, risk, compliance, oversight, controls, accountability, monitoring, assurance, supervision. These concepts are connected, but they are not interchangeable. The Governancepedia Knowledge Library provides a dedicated starting point for navigating these subjects. Instead of beginning with the entire internet, you begin inside a specialist governance knowledge environment. Instead of treating every search as an isolated question, you can explore related concepts. And instead of simply finding an answer and leaving, you can use each discovery as a doorway into the next part of your research. The objective isn't to replace professional judgment, legal advice, regulatory guidance, or your organization's own governance requirements. It's to make the discovery and understanding of governance knowledge more structured. And that becomes especially powerful when you know how to search effectively. Now let's actually search the Governancepedia Knowledge Library. Imagine we have a practical question. How should organizations oversee third-party service providers? That's broad enough to demonstrate how research can develop. Step 1. Enter the Knowledge Library. Start from the Governancepedia website and navigate to the Knowledge Library or Available Knowledge Search area. Rather than browsing randomly, begin with the problem you're actually trying to understand. Our problem is third-party oversight, so that's where we'll start. Step 2. Choose your first search. Enter third-party oversight. The important lesson here is simple. Start broad before becoming narrow. You don't necessarily need to know the perfect governance terminology before searching. Your first search is about discovering the language surrounding the subject. Review the available results and identify the topics that appear closest to your question. Step 3. Examine the results. Don't automatically assume the first result ends your research. Look at the titles. Look at the terminology being used. Look for concepts that repeatedly appear. You may encounter areas connected with third-party governance, vendor oversight, outsourcing, due diligence, risk management, monitoring, controls, accountability, reporting, escalation. Already, the search has accomplished something important. It has helped transform one broad question into several research directions. Step 4. Refine your search. Now make the question more specific. Instead of third-party oversight, try third-party risk monitoring. Then perhaps third-party due diligence. Then third-party governance controls. Notice what's happening. We're moving from discovery towards specific understanding. This is one of the best ways to use a specialist knowledge library. Search. Learn the terminology. Refine. Search again. Step 5. Open relevant knowledge. Once you've identified a relevant entry, open it and focus on the central concept. Ask yourself, what is this? Why does it matter? Who is normally responsible? What processes are connected with it? What terminology don't I understand yet? What should I investigate next? That last question is particularly important. Good research doesn't simply answer questions, it generates better questions. Step 6. Follow connected subjects. Suppose your third-party oversight research introduces the concept of ongoing monitoring. That becomes your next search. Monitoring may lead you toward key risk indicators. That might lead toward risk reporting, which might lead toward governance committees, which might lead toward escalation procedures. A single search has now become a structured research journey. Step 7. Build a search chain. Here's a useful technique. Create a simple mental or written search chain. Third-party oversight, due diligence, monitoring, risk indicators, reporting, escalation, governance committee. Now you're no longer searching randomly. You're mapping a governance subject. And that's where a knowledge library becomes considerably more valuable than simply typing isolated questions into a search engine. Once you understand the basic process, you can make your Governancepedia research much more effective. The first technique is keyword variation. Governance terminology isn't always standardized. If searching for vendor oversight doesn't produce what you expected, try related terminology such as third-party oversight, supplier governance, third-party risk, or outsourcing governance. Different terminology can expose different parts of the same subject. The second technique is concept decomposition. Suppose you're researching effective board governance. That's enormous. Break it apart. Search individually for board responsibilities, board independence, board committees, board reporting, conflicts of interest, executive oversight, board risk oversight. Suddenly, one vague research project becomes 7 manageable questions. The third technique is research by relationship. Don't only ask, what is this? Ask, what is this connected to? If you're studying internal controls, explore risk management. If you're studying risk management, explore reporting. If you're studying reporting, explore committees. If you're studying committees, explore accountability. If you're studying accountability, explore roles and responsibilities. This creates what we might call a governance knowledge map. And over time, you're no longer memorizing isolated definitions. You're understanding how governance concepts interact. That is far more valuable. Let's put everything together. Meet Sarah. Sarah has recently joined a growing company and has been asked to help strengthen its governance arrangements. Her first assignment sounds straightforward: help improve the company's internal control framework. But Sarah quickly discovers how broad that subject is. She searches the internet for internal controls. Millions of results appear. Some focus on accounting, some on cybersecurity, others discuss risk management, audit, compliance, or regulatory controls. Sarah isn't even sure which questions she should be asking yet. So she visits Governancepedia. Her first search is internal controls. She reviews the available knowledge and begins identifying connected concepts. One catches her attention: control frameworks. She explores that subject. That leads her toward risk and control assessments, then control testing, then control effectiveness, then governance reporting, then audit committee oversight. Look at what's happened. Sarah began with 2 words, internal controls, but she has now developed an entire chain of governance concepts that she can investigate. She starts documenting questions. Who owns each control? How should effectiveness be assessed? How frequently should controls be reviewed? How are failures reported? Who receives the reports? When should issues be escalated? What oversight should senior management provide? What should reach the board? Governancepedia hasn't simply given Sarah something to read. It has helped her structure the subject she needs to understand. That's the practical value of searching a specialist knowledge library. If you're planning to use Governancepedia regularly, there are several ways to make your research much more productive. Tip 1. Search the concept, not the entire question. Start with the most important governance concept. Instead of searching a very long question, identify the core subject first. For example, board independence, operational risk, conflicts of interest, governance reporting. Then refine from there. Tip 2. Search related terminology. Governance vocabulary varies between organizations, industries, and jurisdictions. If one phrase doesn't uncover what you need, try alternatives. Tip 3. Go from broad to narrow. Start with risk governance, then narrow toward board risk oversight, then perhaps risk committee responsibilities. This prevents you from narrowing your research too early. Tip 4. Build research chains. Whenever you discover an unfamiliar but relevant concept, search it next. One topic should naturally lead into another. Tip 5. Separate knowledge from requirements. Governancepedia can help you understand concepts and explore governance knowledge, but always distinguish general knowledge from the specific legal, regulatory, contractual, or organizational requirements that apply to your situation. Where necessary, verify requirements against appropriate authoritative sources or professional advice. A great first Governancepedia journey. If you've never explored Governancepedia before, don't simply visit the homepage and leave. Choose one governance subject you genuinely want to understand. For example, board oversight. Search it. Open a relevant topic. Identify 3 related concepts. Search each one. Then choose the most interesting result and go another level deeper. After only a few searches, you'll have moved from casually browsing Governancepedia to actively researching governance. And that's when the knowledge library starts becoming genuinely useful. So what have we learned? Governancepedia is designed for people who want to discover, explore, and better understand governance knowledge. It provides a specialist environment for exploring subjects including governance structures, oversight, risk, controls, accountability, committees, policies, and many other interconnected topics. And today's featured capability, the Governancepedia Knowledge Library, provides the starting point for that discovery. We've seen how to begin with a broad topic, how to identify important terminology, how to refine searches, how to break complex governance subjects into smaller questions, how to follow connected concepts, and how to build an entire research journey from one initial search. Remember, search, discover, refine, can understand. That's the workflow. So if you've ever opened a search engine looking for one governance answer and ended up with 20 browser tabs and even more questions, Governancepedia gives you another place to begin. Visit Governancepedia and choose one governance subject you want to understand better. Search it. Follow where the knowledge takes you, and see how quickly one question can turn into a much deeper understanding of governance. If you found this walkthrough useful, subscribe to the Governancepedia YouTube channel. Every week, we'll put another governance concept, capability, or area of Governancepedia under the spotlight. We'll explain what it is, why it matters, and how you can explore it. And before we finish, there's one more thing worth knowing. Governancepedia is part of the wider MP Nerds ecosystem. MP Nerds develops and operates digital platforms, specialist knowledge websites, and online resources covering areas including business, governance, services, collections, and learning. Each has its own audience, each has its own purpose. And here on Governancepedia, the mission remains clear. Make governance knowledge easier to discover, explore, and understand. So tell us in the comments, what governance topic should we explain next? Board oversight, internal controls, risk governance, audit committees, third-party oversight, conflicts of interest, or something completely different? And if there's a governance concept you've encountered but never completely understood, tell us that too. It could become the subject of a future episode. Explore Governancepedia, subscribe for next week's walkthrough, and we'll see you in the next episode of Governancepedia Explained. Search the knowledge, connect the concepts, understand governance.